What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, we got some unfortunate news for the boxing fans, as undefeated two-division world champion, reigning WBC middleweight world champion, superstar boxer Jermall Lions Only Charlo, 31 wins, no losses, 22 wins by way of knockout. He's 31 years of age. He's 30 years of age, stands at 6 feet tall with a 73.5-inch arm reach. He's scheduled to face Juan Montello, June 19th in a showdown in Houston, Texas. With that stated, Jermall Charlo, he states that he has no interest in unifying the belts against undefeated two-division world champion, currently the WBO middleweight reigning world champion, superstar boxer Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, nor does he have interest in moving up to super middleweight, 168-pound limit, and challenging former two-time super middleweight WBC undefeated world champion Mexican superstar boxer David Benavidez. With that said, obviously, David Benavidez, he's been calling out Jermall Charlo since Jermall Charlo made mention of his name in a few interviews. And Demetrius Andrade, he's been calling out Jermall Charlo, but he most recently called out Jermall Charlo in his last fight when he took on Liam Williams and got a unanimous decision victory in that fight. With that said, Jermall Charlo, he states he has no interest in fighting either guy. He has no interest in fighting Demetrius Andrade. For one, nobody knows who Demetrius Andrade is. He says Demetrius Andrade is at odds with money. He needs money, so he's looking to secure the biggest fights possible because he's void of money. And on top of it, 5 years ago, he was scheduled to fight his brother. He signed on the dotted line. The week of the fight, Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, he pulled out the fight to fight his identical twin brother in Jermall Charlo, who's the two-time junior middleweight world champion and a unified junior middleweight world champion superstar boxer who is widely considered by many, as he should be, to be top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. He's heading into an undisputed match against Brian Castano that's scheduled to take place July 17th. With that said, Jermall Charlo was scheduled to fight Demetrius Andrade. They got to the week of the fight, and Demetrius Andrade, he pulled out the fight. That left a bad taste in the mouth of boxing fans, boxing pundits, but more importantly, the Charlo family, the Charlo team, and the Charlo brothers themselves, Jermall and Jermall Charlo. When it comes to David Benavidez, Jermall Charlo, he states that he's just simply not a super middleweight, so please stop mentioning him with David Benavidez because he's not going up to super middleweight. He has business to take care of at middleweight. And he said to please stop mentioning Demetrius Andrade's name because Demetrius Andrade, he's not well known. Everybody continues to throw out his name and mention his name with Jermall Charlo's name. He's being linked to him. He says please stop mentioning his name because he's not well known. Nobody knows who he is. And he's just looking to seek money at this current time. That's the reason why he's called out Jermall Charlo. The problem with that is that Jermall Charlo is stating that, but you're fighting Juan Montello, and nobody knows who Juan Montello is. He's 22 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws. Prior to that, you fought Sergey Derevyanchenko, who's known within the hardcore boxing fan realm, but he's not known outside the hardcore boxing fan realm. And he has a total of 15 fights in his entire career. And prior to that, you fought Dennis Hogan, who was 28 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. Prior to that, you fought Brandon Adams. These are not the biggest names in the sport of boxing. And one can argue that Demetrius Andrade is a far bigger name than everybody involved, with the exception of maybe Sergey Derevyanchenko. But for the most part, Demetrius Andrade is definitely a bigger name than Dennis Hogan. He's definitely a two-division world champion. He's far more respected in the boxing world than Dennis Hogan, Brandon Adams, Sergey Derevyanchenko to the extent, and as well as Juan Montello. Okay, if you made a fight between Sergey Derevyanchenko and Demetrius Andrade, It's probably a 50-50 fight for most that understand the sport of boxing. But Demetrius Andrade, he will open up as the favorite over Sergey Derevyanchenko. Prior to that, you fought Matt Korobov. Prior to that, you fought Hugo Centeno Jr. Prior to that, you fought Sebastian Hyland. These are not big names within the sport of boxing. So if you're going based off of the fact that he pulled out the fight against Jermall Charlo, and business-wise, you just choose not to do business with him because it left a bad taste in your mouth, your team, your family, so on and such, that's understandable. But to say he's not well-known, Demetrius Andrade, who's an undefeated two-division world champion, and he's reigning WBO middleweight world champion, and he has an extensive amateur background. He's well respected within the sport of boxing, and these are the last guys that you fought, and they can't even come close to Demetrius Andrade's name. Well, that's just not a good look. When it comes to David Benavidez, Jermall Charlo, he stated that he's just simply not a super middleweight. That David Benavidez, needs to get in shape, focusing on his division. But at the same token, he says that he would much rather fight Demetrius Andrade than to fight David Benavidez, but he has no interest in fighting either guy. Okay? So if that's the case, it leaves one to wonder, after Juan Montello, what's the plans for Jermall Charlo? Because time is not on his side. And the other champions have no interest in facing him in two-time middleweight world champion, superstar boxer Gennady Triple G Golovkin, who's the IBF middleweight world champion, and WBA middleweight world champion Murata. He has no interest in fighting Jermall Charlo either. So there's no unification bout for him. And on top of that, they're talking about facing off against one another. And get this, in December. So the last time Gennady Golovkin fought was December. And the last time Murata fought was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And they're talking about they're going to face off against one another in December. And we are in the middle of April. The year just started. So we haven't even gotten to the summertime. And they're talking about fighting in the winter. So that lets you know they have no interest in fighting Jermall Charlo. And essentially, in my opinion, I believe that they should either retire, or those respective sanctioning bodies, WBA and IBF, should be looking to relieve them of their titles if they're not going to be active, because they're simply holding up the sport of boxing. If those fights were available for Jermall Charlo, I would be all for it. But seeing as though they're not, he needs to go to the next best option, which would be Demetrius Andrade in his own weight class, if he's stating that he's not a super middleweight, 168-pounder. And if you're not going to fight Demetrius Andrade, Gennady Golovkin, or Murata, what is your plans at 160, seeing as though another option seemed to be Chris Eubanks Jr., and he's going up to 168, and then there's talks that he could possibly retire because he has interest in other areas, in other sports. So what is going to be the option at 160 for Jermall Charlo? We know that Jermall Charlo, he said he would knock out David Benavidez 6 rounds or under. He also said the same for undefeated IBF super middleweight world champion Caleb Plant. Now, we do know he's been trying to secure a fight with 4-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Saul Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo Alvarez, he has no interest in fighting Jermall Charlo. He made that abundantly clear when he was at 154. And then when he was at 160, Jermall Charlo became his mandatory, and he vacated the belt to be franchised as the WBC president, Mauricio Suleiman. He was just on Barbershop Conversations, in which he stated that Canelo Alvarez understood that the WBC was putting this in motion. They were looking to implement this franchise title into the sport of boxing. And since he knew that this was a goal of theirs, he petitioned them to have this franchise belt, so that way he didn't have to honor his mandatory in Jermall Charlo. So we know he has no interest in fighting Jermall Charlo. Now, more recently, he did state that he's in the prime of his career and that he would knock out Jermall Charlo. And there's a possibility that fight could happen in the future. But that's not going to happen this year, seeing as though Canelo Alvarez, he has a fight coming up, a unification bout with WBO 2-division world champion, British superstar, undefeated boxer Billy Joe Saunders. That's scheduled to take place May 8th. And should he get past Billy Joe Saunders May 8th, then he's looking to go into an undisputed showdown in September with Caleb Plant. Now, maybe at the end of the year, he could possibly, revisit the opportunity. As Canelo stated, he wanted to fight 4 times this year. And we know he already fought Avni Yildirim in February. So now he's going to fight again in May. He's going to fight in September. He said he wanted to fight 4 times. So maybe he fights at the end of the year, possibly in December. Maybe Jermall Charlo can get that fight. But Jermall Charlo's fighting June 19th. The last time he fought was September 26th of 2020. He's going to fight June 19th, and then he's going to wait till the end of December, to the end of the year in December to face off against Canelo Alvarez. So, there's not too many options for Jermall Charlo, especially at 160 if he's not going to fight. Even though we would love to, I would personally love to see him face off against Murata or Gennady Golovkin in a unification bout. The bigger, more competitive fight would be him versus Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade is arguably the best middleweight in the world, not named Jermall Charlo, okay? Demetrius Andrade, I believe, would beat Gennady Golovkin and Murata. So the best fight for him in competitive-wise would be against Demetrius Andrade. Now, at 168, you have to understand that David Benavidez was considered the best super middleweight in the world. He lost his belts on the scale and outside of the ring both times. He didn't lose it in the ring. Now, with that said, that's not Jermall Charlo's or anybody else's fault that David Benavidez mishap, outside the ring. But competitive-wise, the best fight at 160 would be Andrade, and it would be a fight of the year candidate, and probably the top 3 fights in boxing, him versus David Benavidez. So we got to see how this plays out, because the fan base is getting restless with the Monteo fights and the lower level opposition against Jermall Charlo. The biggest step up he had was Sergey Derevyanchenko, and that was due to the fact that Sergey Derevyanchenko gave Danny Jacobs a rough fight, and he also gave Gennady Triple G Golovkin a rough fight. He arguably won the fight against Gennady Triple G Golovkin, but he didn't get the nod. So that's the biggest fight on his resume. We have to see how this unfolds and plays out. What's next for Jermall Charlo? But if he's not going to fight the best, the fans are going to get real restless. And, this could be not a good look for Jermall Charlo. But make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share the videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
Hey, this is Ebony Bridges, Blonde Bomber, and you're watching Blue Blood Sports TV.